Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Roadshow edition today. I'm out in near the Washington, D.C., actually in the area here outside of Walter Reed Medical Facility here. That's a story for another day, but I didn't want to wait until I got back to the office to keep going. I know you're looking for Doug McGregor right now. We're having some communications challenges. Hopefully, we'll get him back very soon. He'll join us in progress, but there's way too many things going on right now to hold off on that. So as soon as we do, will come in. But let's get right into it here, because while everybody's been focused, understandably, on all that's going on in Venezuela, what might be going on in Greenland or in Colombia or in Mexico or God only knows where else, who knows what may be next on the hit list. Russia-Ukraine is continuing to exist, and there's still things going on with that. There is, in fact, today a not a press conference, but a meeting of a lot of the so-called coalition of the willing in Paris. Earlier this morning, Zelensky met with Emmanuel Macron, and now there's lots of other meetings that are planning out throughout the day. One of the key things is, in fact, Witkoff and Jared Kushner are there representing the United States. And the U.S. ambassador to NATO, Whitaker, went on television earlier today to explain where the Americans are in this process.
What we should expect is really a finalization of a couple agreements. One is the Coalition of the Willing, which is about 50 allied countries, many of them in NATO, are going to, agree to a certain security framework for Ukraine, and so is the United States, both as part of that Coalition of the Willing and separately. And so that negotiation is going to be finalized. I'm guessing that those documents will ultimately be entered into very soon between Ukraine and the Coalition of the Willing and all the partners. And at the same time, that then frees up the Ukrainians and President Zelensky to go and make the final deal as part of the 20-point plan with Russia. And so, we're really very far down the road. This is a great development, and we could be on the cusp of a peace deal.
In his comment there right at the end, when he says, we are very far, I thought he was going to say very far away from ending this, because that would make sense based on what he just said about the 20-point peace plan and all that. But instead, we're very far down the road, and I think we're on the cusp of peace, when he had literally just said that once we get all this stuff settled, then the Ukraine side can go back and talk to the Russians. Folks, understand this. I keep saying this, it's just hard to hear it over and over, but it's necessary to repeat, because apparently some people aren't getting this. There will be no negotiated settlement. It's not even possible until you get both sides agreeing on a common set of factors. Whatever the number of points are, they both have to be agreed to both sides. If you're only talking to one side here, and all of the guys that are on your side and you like, et cetera, and you're not even talking to the other side, then you're not close to anything. You're not down the road anywhere. All you're doing is on a treadmill with your buddies in a workout gym. That's about the best you can say about what's happening in Paris. These folks, these points, they don't matter. The 20-point peace plan doesn't matter if you're not even looking at the Russian side. And listen, you don't have to necessarily get together with the Russians to know where they're going to be. If you're meeting on your treadmill and you say, all right, well, here's what the Russians have been saying since, 2021, 2007, pick your date, because they're hardly any different. But certainly since this war started, they've been very consistent. And just for continuity's sake, let's go back to June of 2024, because there has been no change in the Russian position then, to include just recently as much as last month, when they keep talking about their positions. So you can take all of those positions and say, all right, in our little treadmill meeting here, how can we get to this point here? How can we get to issues on what the Russians are saying is the demilitarization, or the denazification, or the size of the Ukraine military, the territory, which is obviously one of the big things, the rights for the Russian ethnic people that would be residing inside whatever's left of Ukraine, and of course, one of the absolute biggest ones, neutrality status, no NATO. Now, If you can work with those in your little treadmill deal, then you actually have a shot at something. But every evidence we've seen so far and everything that Ambassador Whitaker just said right there implies we're still just playing with ourselves and no one's even talking about what the Russians are doing. So once you agree with whatever comes out of this Paris meeting and whatever agreement the West side at large can come to an agreement with, then you're going to have to go to Russia. So whether that's Ukraine particular, which it should be, or the United States or some combination thereof, you're going to have to go to the Russian side. And spoiler alert, their position hasn't changed at all. There's no difference in anything that they've been saying. So you can know with certainty that whenever you come out of this meeting here in Paris and you go to Russia with your little piece of paper and your whatever the new points are, if there's not something very close to what Russia said last month, which is what they repeated from last June of last year, rather, 2024, then you don't have anything. And unfortunately, folks, I've just not seen any evidence of any kind of realistic and rational thinking, no change. I mean, here we are in 2026 now. So we're a year and a half away from that June 2024 period of time. And then after all the things that have happened, even in this recent times here, with the loss of Pokrovsk, with the loss of Mirnograd, with the advances in the Zaporizhia area, with the advances in the north, in the Sumy area, in the Kharkiv area, at what point do you finally say, this ain't working? And because we keep losing on the battlefield, and of course that's predicated on the fact that your troops, you don't have enough troops, you don't have enough industrial capacity, and even though, listen, the Ukraine side is doing miraculous work in the drone areas and in the, especially with all these missiles that keep falling on the industry and the energy infrastructure throughout Ukraine, that they're still able to produce a lot of the stuff is just a testament to their just their raw, not just courage, but also intellect and every other thing. It's great. It's not enough. It isn't enough, and it just doesn't matter all these things you can do because you've got a mountain to climb and you're struggling to get up a small little hill, and you can't get up the mountain with what you have because Russia has too many things on their side, because they are also working with drones. They are also showing great ingenuity, except they have more resources. And there was another attack from the Ukraine side into Russia overnight. I think they hit another oil infrastructure, refining, reprocessing facility, big dramatic fire. Those all hurt on the Russian side. It's not enough because while we only pay attention to these videos of when there's a strike, what we never pay attention to in the West is that after that's over, they go back and they repair the facilities, just like the Ukraine side has been doing for all these years of the war. And yet you see even that hasn't knocked them out, and it's not going to do anything to the Russian side either. It's going to make them mad. It's going to hurt a little bit. It may cause some disruptions here and there, but minor, incidental, and no impact on the front line. There's been no impact at all in the front line. Of course, you don't do anything with the manpower on either side. You can't make people out of nothing. You can print, you can do 3D printing for drones. You can't do 3D printing for troops. That's the non-negotiable here. So we'll wait and see what comes out of this, but that's kind of where we are on the Russia-Ukraine front. Tomorrow is the Orthodox Christmas on January the 7th. So I kind of expect it to be some low operations there in terms of the fighting on the front line. I don't think they're going to take the day off or anything, but I think they probably will, because both sides are Orthodox at the believer level anyway. And so I suspect that you might see lower operations. So I don't think anything big's going to happen in the next 48 hours or so. Starting on the 8th again, things could ramp up. So we'll see what happens with that. But that's kind of where we are there. Other things that are going on in the world. Maybe you've heard about something in our hemisphere. A lot happening there. But some of these things actually are related to this war here. And in fact, in talking about the success, the tactical success that we had, the United States in Venezuela by grabbing Maduro, as I've said many times, just taking it purely on the military perspective of the very narrow mission of a snatch and grab of the head of state somewhere else and all the things that went along with it, CIA stuff, probably some double agents that were happening too. And then the on top of the other things that are going on with all of our operations, everything that happened there was great. Okay, no question about it. It was also limited. Well, you understand this. This is something we're going to see here in the rest of this episode. Don't get too carried away with how magnificent and fabulous the United States military is, because we had a successful 2-hour operation to snatch and grab. As impressive as it was, and it is impressive, so I'm not downplaying that, but when you're talking about in the larger scheme of things of military power and national military power, don't confuse a successful 2-hour operation with a narrow operation objective to capabilities at the national level against other militaries. That's different. And I fear that people are not getting the difference there. And you'll see why I say that in a second. First of all, let's start off with Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who's kind of, and predictably, he's doing a victory lap, beating his chest, talking about how great we are. And he didn't miss the opportunity to talk about how sucky the Russian air defense is.
We saw 3 nights ago in downtown Caracas in Venezuela, as nearly 200 of our greatest Americans went downtown in Caracas. Seems those Russian air defenses didn't quite work so well, did they? Downtown Caracas, and grabbed an indicted individual wanted by American justice in support of law enforcement without a single American killed. Reestablishing deterrence.
See, I said a lot of people, led by Secretary Hegseth, want to talk about how great we are. We reestablished deterrence. That's been one of his monikers that he said ever since he's gotten into office. And listen, this plays well in the media. This plays well in front of people because, you know, they had all that dramatic video that Gary showed you a couple of days ago about the bombs going off in the nighttime in Caracas and these, helicopters flying across. I mean, really looked like something straight out of a movie. And then we see that we got the guy out. We killed a bunch of Cubans, which we've been bragging about incessantly. Apparently up to 80 people killed altogether. And then we took him out. We got him back in and we paraded him in front of the world in New York. And he's going to, American justice and all this kind of stuff. So we're talking a lot about that. And, Hegseth is saying that we have reestablished. And people said, and F around and find out and all this kind of stuff. And just, this braggadocious stuff. But look, that plays well in the media for regular people. But when you're talking about other countries, and specifically China and Russia and North Korea and Iran, they're looking at things a little bit more soberly. And they recognize that the United States has a lot of power. They've always known that. That's never been a point of confusion. But they also realize, and especially China and Russia, the limitations of our power. Because let me explain something to anyone who may not be. You can have this big splashy mission here, and the military can operate with incredible precision like happened here for this tactical operation. But when you're talking about fighting a war, especially one like the Russia-Ukraine is, where it's a war of attrition, you have to have the capacity to sustain combat operations. You have to have the manpower, you have to have the equipment, you have to have the ammunition stockpiles, and you have to have the ability to sustain that at relevant levels over an extended period of time. Russians learned that to their pain in the beginning of the war. They thought they were ready, they weren't. Took about another year and a half to get up to that point to where now then they can comfortably sustain across all of those realms almost indefinitely, certainly for the foreseeable future. We can't. So you can beat your chest about how we've established deterrence, but we have to hope nobody tests us. We have to hope that nobody says, I'm looking at the spreadsheet here, not just at the camera, not just at the video about how splashy and cool that operation was, but I'm looking at the spreadsheet and I'm seeing your industrial capacity is really low in comparison to what's necessary. I'm seeing that your manpower, the Ukraine army itself has, who knows what the real number is, somewhere between 700,000 and 900,000 or so. The Russian military has somewhere around 1.5 million active forces. I forget what the Chinese number is, but it's somewhere maybe close to 2 million, something like that. America, who is spread to the four winds of the globe, has less than 500,000 total active army or ground troops. So when you look at the Army and the Marine Corps together, the active forces, just a small fraction of that. And we're spread to the four winds. We want to say we have this global dominance. But if you have to fight somewhere, we don't have the number of troops Now you talk about the Navy. We're spread also to the 4 seas, the 7 seas. We got ships everywhere. We have bases and all this kind of stuff. And that looks great on paper. But we don't have the industrial capacity with anti-ship missiles, with air defense missiles that are needed for ship defenses. And the same goes for land and all of that. We don't have enough to sustain something. If we get into a war, we can't sustain the operations, and we don't have enough manpower to sustain something over time. We would have to have a major mobilization of our reserves. We would have to recruit more people in. It would take a long time to get up to the position that we have, folks. And we just don't have it. So when you talk about deterrence, you have to hope that nobody says, all right, we're going to test you. We don't believe you can do it. See, so far, Venezuela has complied with what we've asked to do. And you see that current or interim President Rodriguez is saying, okay, I want to work with you. She was kind of defiant in her first speech, but subsequent to that, she's kind of now saying, okay, we'll work with you because we want peace and all this kind of stuff. Now, how's that going to work out with who's going to run? Because President Trump still says, I'm running the show. I'm going to tell you who's going to do it. If they don't obey what I say, we'll come back in, might kill some more people, might capture some more people. They should be worried, all this kind of stuff. Now, we hope that they just, cower down and bend over, and they might. So we might get away with it again, maybe. But it's also possible that at some point people say, you know what, I'm tired of being pushed around. I'm tired of this. I'm just going to push back and come what may. People have done that in the past. And if enough people do that, and especially if we ever get into a situation where we think we're fighting Russia or China, they know we don't have that. So we need to be a lot more sober-minded and understand that the actual adversaries who can do harm to us at the nuclear level and conventional level are well aware of what I've told you, and they are not impressed by Secretary Hegseth up there beating his chest. They're not impressed by that. We shouldn't think, and that's one of the things that worries me, is so much arrogance in here. Stephen Miller has just been crowing like crazy. Lindsey Graham has been crowing like crazy, talking about how great we are. And now then, of course, we're talking about maybe we should go get Greenland. Something about 20 days from now, 19 days from now, I guess. Something may come up. We don't know what that meant. Trump mentioned that time frame. A lot of people in Europe are really worried about that. We talk about how we're going to strangle Cuba, little tiny Cuba that's a threat to no one and can barely keep their people fed. Somehow we think it's in our national interest and necessary to destroy them. It's pathetic, frankly, but that's what we're doing. We're like, now we can. We've been doing this since 1962, and now that it's time to go get them, finish the job, et cetera. And oh, by the way, there's Iran. Don't forget about Iran. We can go there too. You see what I'm saying? We can get bogged down here like a Gulliver even. We can all of a sudden find out all these Lilliputians together are more than we can handle. And God help us if we actually fight a peer country, because we can't handle that. So a little sober-mindedness would be helpful, but I don't see any evidence of that so far either. I fear that we have this little tactical success here, and we project that at the strategic level and think that we can do everything to everyone all the time with no constraints, and everyone will bow the knee, as Jack Keane said the other day when talking about what we want to happen. He said that's what Venezuela is going to have to bend the knee to our will. And if they don't, we'll go after them. I'm afraid too many people think that across the board now and thinking, yeah, we're all that. We're not. And I pray to God that we don't find that out. Now, mentioning Greenland and what's going on in Europe as well. That's also a cause of concern. So if a lot of other people around the world, potential adversaries, are concerned about what we might do and our military adventurism, that actually works also at the moral level, even among our allies. Now, there was an interview on British media today on one of the members of Parliament, a guy who serves as the Shadow Defense Minister, according to his title, is that the presenter is kind of agitated because they're saying, look, we always talk this big game about the rules-based order and just and lasting peace and all this kind of stuff, and we want to hold Russia accountable. And then they're looking over here across the pond, they're saying America ain't exactly living up to that. In fact, that they're driving it further into the ground, and a lot of them are getting kind of tired of this. And so she asked this guy point blank, I'm kind of tired of everybody just bending the knee to America.
I have been, quite taken aback, I'll be honest, by politicians from both Labour and the Conservatives being very reluctant to criticise Donald Trump, who has said he wants to take over Greenland. And the Danish Prime Minister has come forward.
Did he use the phrase take over?
We need Greenland for national security. We need it right now. He says, he's gone on to say, I think Greenland's very important for the national security of the United States. I mean, he's been saying this for a long time as well. This is not just comments. He's been making these comments.
I get that, but he's not said we're going to take over Greenland, which is slightly different wording. But look, I totally understand why you're saying that. But equally,
should he be making these threats?
Your point was, about reluctance to criticise. First of all, the United States is our closest ally, very important ally of the United Kingdom. Secondly, actually, if you take the Venezuela situation, whatever one thinks of the method, and I have to say militarily it was a spectacular operation, it would appear, there are benefits from that in terms of, Maduro's now gone. He was a terrible leader for Venezuela. What I think is most important from all of this is that Venezuela now has a chance to transition to a stable democracy. Now, that is not straightforward, but I think that should be the top priority. And what I would want to see from the Prime Minister and the Labour government is using all diplomatic means to ensure that that can happen. And I think there's a consensus on that point.
Okay. That's a little longer of a clip than I normally use, but I wanted to have that whole exchange there so you can see. She starts off saying, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of asking these questions and not getting answers to it. And then he starts to answer the question. He says, no, I'm going to address your question. And he never did. He never said a word about challenging the United States or stopping up for the actual values, et cetera. He then immediately, he said a second time, no, I'm going to get to your question. And then he starts talking about something else, changes the subject total about freedom in Venezuela, and we hope that we get whatever. He never answered the question. So he literally just reiterated exactly the problem that was making her unhappy. She's not the only one. Just a couple of days before this, another presenter had the prime minister himself in the seat and said the same kind of thing. What about what we claim to be true? Are you going to do anything about it?
You've been incredibly clear always that Vladimir Putin's attack on a sovereign country of Ukraine was wrong and ought to be condemned. What about President Trump's attack on a sovereign country of Venezuela? There are all sorts of horrors that we know about President Maduro's government, but for America to strike that country and then capture its leader, that's an action against a sovereign state that surely flies in the face of international law.
Well, at the moment, it's a fast-moving situation.
We know those facts. President Trump, the White House has said that they captured Maduro and they struck his country. So there's a lot we don't know, but we do know that. So will you condemn that action against a sovereign state?
Well, I want to get all the material facts together, and we simply haven't got the full picture at the moment. It's fast-moving. And we need to piece that together. I can be really clear with you that there was no UK involvement in this operation, and obviously we're working in relation to British citizens and nationals who are there with our embassy. But we need to establish a full picture. I then need to speak to President Trump. I need to speak to our allies. But I don't shy away from this. I've been a lifelong advocate of international law and the importance of compliance with international law. But I want to ensure that I've got all the facts at my disposal.
I don't shy away from it. You did shy away from it. That's exactly what you did. You didn't do anything at all. Again, just like the British MP today, the Prime Minister a couple of days ago won't answer the question. And then the British media, and this is unusual, because the British media has been completely lined up behind everything about, hey, you know what, whatever you said, whatever the President Trump says, that's what we're going to do. We're just going to fall in line behind it. And now that here, when given the opportunity, sorry, I got a helicopter flying right over my head here. When given the opportunity to say, hey, what matters more? Do you actually have values, or are you literally just a vassal of doing whatever Washington tells you, whoever happens to be in the White House at that time? It's a valid question. So far, the answer is we're a vassal, because they won't stand up to anything, because there's no question that President Trump is just running roughshod over international law. It doesn't even exist right now. Period. Past tense. It's gone. There is no international law that's going to constrain President Trump. There is no domestic law in the United States that's going to constrain President Trump. There is no political balance of powers or anything else. The Constitution, none of that stuff will constrain him. He will do whatever he wants, because when anyone has tried to hold back with words, it's meaningless. He just does what he wants. And you see, he continues to go forward. And now he's threatening all these other countries. Well, if it's in our hemisphere, that's one thing. Europeans could not like it. They could say, well, this kind of is embarrassing because we claim to care about international law. We claim to care about, doing the right thing and the rules-based order and all this kind of stuff. And obviously there's no truth to it when they just stand silently by, won't even offer any kind of criticism when given the opportunity to do so. And so that people are seeing it doesn't mean anything. Well, it's one thing when it's over here. What about if it's Greenland? Because now we have the issue with Denmark. They're really concerned because they see that Trump said all this stuff about Venezuela, carried it through. They see that he's talking about, destroying Cuba, and he's taken action that seems like it's going to carry that through. He's threatening Colombia. Who knows if he's going to do anything with that or not? He's threatened Mexico. I mean, where does it stop? Because when you get this, and I had a show the other day called Blood in the Water, like a shark, when it starts getting blood, it just goes crazy and it goes on a feeding frenzy. That's kind of what we're facing right now, and why the Europeans should be a lot more concerned than they are, and they need to be standing up for what used to be the values of the West. Used to be our values. It was never perfectly done. There was always some dark edges and some shady undersides. Unfortunately, we've never been clean all the way through, but at least in the world, we did try. We actually did things that were good. We actually did things that benefited other countries. We actually did restrain ourselves. We actually did follow the rule of law to a degree. That's gone. Whatever sins we may have had in the past, they're pale in comparison to where we are now. So the question is, to my European friends, is anyone ever going to stand up? Do you actually have values? Do you actually believe in the rule of law? Do you actually believe that there should be freedom and that people should have the right to whatever kind of government they were, self-determination? Or are those just words that you use to dominate other people? And now that when it's not working that way, you just want to go, I need more information. I need all the facts. I got to talk. Come on. Either you believe it or you don't. This stuff is not hard. There comes a point to where if you're going to man up and be a leader and say what you believe and then act on it. And if you don't act on it, then I could care less what words come out of your mouth, because your actions will speak louder, and that will say it. If they say silent, then we're going to know there are no values for the Europeans except for whatever President of the United States says. But what are you going to do if President Trump actually moves against Greenland? We may find out. We may find out that there actually is a limit to the Europeans. They may actually have some values that can be unearthed, because there are a lot of Europeans who do. I know many of them who are very much appalled by this and who are livid with what's going on and are angry at their own people. You see, even the presenters at the British media there are asking really hard questions. Now, I wish they'd have followed those up with some more, but at least they ask them, and that by itself is a moniker of potential change. They're going to have a lot more of that, because it's not out of the question that we couldn't do more. And that President Trump and his feeding frenzy, blood in the water kind of moment, may just say, yeah, I'm going to take Greenland. You can either get out of the way and give me what I want and submit and bend the knee like Venezuela, I'm trying to get them to do, or I'll just take it. That's not out of the question. That's not a hyperbolic statement anymore. That's actually legitimately possible. And the Prime Minister of Denmark is right to be worried about it. And Europeans should be more worried about it than they are. We'll see how that's going to work out. One of the things that does not lead to a positive hope that we're not going to take down that path is another thing that a couple of other things I want to point out. One is that in that same Ambassador Whitaker I pointed out a minute ago, talking about what's happened in Paris, he also talked about, kind of reinforcing what Secretary Hegseth said about how great we are and how awesome, and what everybody in the world should have learned from this Venezuela op.
It's a big win for the United States of America and the security of the Western Hemisphere. I think any adversary of the United States should be concerned about what they saw the United States do, because one, it demonstrated capabilities that no other country can execute. And at the same time, it demonstrates that the United States, when the president says something, when we draw a red line, that we're willing to enforce that with our power. And that, to me, is what ensures peace through strength.
Peace through strength. No, what that does is say, I'm going to instill fear in everybody, that I'm going to take what I want. I'm going to ask you an honest question here. Be honest. Does that not sound like Hitler and Czechoslovakia in the 1930s? I mean, honestly, this is what we accuse Hitler of doing all the time. He crept up. First, it was the Sudetenland, and then he took over Czechoslovakia. Then they reinvaded the Rhineland area, right next to France, against the Versailles Treaty. Sorry, that was first. Then they took the Sudetenland, and then they had the Anschluss in Austria, bit by bit by bit. But that's all I'm going to do. That's all I'm going to take, etc. And then, of course, they call everybody to appeasers because Neville Chamberlain, said, yeah, we had peace in our time and all that kind of stuff, right? Because they saw Hitler doing all these things, and everybody says, all right, well, that's all he's going to do. The Versailles Peace Treaty, well, that wasn't fair anyway. So that put unjust. This kind of replaced all that. Whatever, they can justify anything in the world because they didn't want to have a war. And then we know what happened from that point. Now, like the Wehrmacht, unlike the Hitler's Germany, we don't have the armed forces that can do a whole lot more. But President Trump may not be constrained by that. He may not be aware that we can't do those things, and he may keep going and keep trying to do more things here. I mean, literally, we're already, Colombia might be in the crosshairs, Mexico might be in the crosshairs, even Cuba might be in the crosshairs, although they'll probably just try and strangle them economically, and Greenland could be in the crosshairs. All those things are possible. And at what point do you say, well, he meant this as Venezuela? And you heard Ambassador Whitaker himself say that's the lesson you're supposed to get. When President Trump says something, he means it. So you either get the hell out of the way, give him what he asked for, or we'll take it. Tell me that's not what he said and what they have done. So if that's the message, that's an alarm.
Well, nothing is proving constraint to him. Only us, only we can, only our allies. If ever there was a time for Keir Starmer, for Emmanuel Macron, for all these folks, Merz, to stand up and say no, for the Prime Minister of Holland, no, that's it. You cannot go here. This line and no further. If we can't say that to ourselves, where is he going to stop? Because evidence suggests that he may be going a lot further. And it's a roll of the dice to say, well, he doesn't mean that. You realize that's what they said about Hitler. He didn't mean that. He's not going to go to war and take Poland, right? He did all these other things, but that's just fill in the blank. They made all these excuses, but his evidence said that he was. Now, at this moment in history, I have no idea. I don't know what Trump's doing. He could well just be blustering. He may have in his mind, all right, this is as far as I could go Venezuela because that was relatively easy, but I can't actually go to war with Colombia. We don't have the troops for that. I'm definitely not going to do it in Mexico and have all this instability on my actual border. He may just be wanting to bluster and saying, I'll just talk a good game because of these other things that I've done. And so then they'll understand it. They'll just give me what I want. And otherwise, they'll just make up some excuse. That is entirely possible. That may be exactly what he's doing. I hope. But even when you're looking at, there was another Senator Schmidt who posted this video of him himself on the news, where he's saying that not only should some of our adversaries get this message, but also specifically another nuclear power, China, should also get the message.
This is making sure the Venezuelan people can actually, they've been sort of ridden of Maduro now. They're going to move forward. And again, the U.S. has a very important interest here in the Western Hemisphere that Venezuela isn't the playground for the CCP, which is what the CCP wanted. It's very interesting that Chinese delegation was there.
Yeah.
If you don't think China noticed that we were able to do this under the cover of darkness without them knowing anything about it, that's a very important point, too, for deterrence as well.
Because that's what worries me. He may believe what he's saying there. He may think that, oh, them Chinese, they were on the ground in Venezuela. They saw when we come in that only America could have pulled off an operation like this. So they better beware. This is our hemisphere, hands off. Except that, well, simultaneous to that and concurrent with that, while they had to get the hell out of our hemisphere, that means China and Russia too. Nobody can do anything except what we authorize the entire hemisphere. Rubio's been preaching that like a gospel. But we can go into your hemisphere, China. We can go into your hemisphere, Russia. We can move a military alliance right up to your border. We can have it literally on your border. We can move German troops, for example, NATO troops into the Baltic areas. We can add to it. We can build up all this stuff on your border. That's fine. There's no problem with that, and you better not complain about it. China, we're going to continue to have all these military bases throughout. We're going to have the AUKUS group. We're going to have Five Eyes, all kinds of stuff in that area. We're going to improve our military bases on Japan. We have military bases in the Philippines. We have military base on Guam. We have military base in South Korea. All those kind of things, all arrayed against you. We're going to say that we're going to build up this big Pacific initiative, and we're going to spend billions of dollars in the coming year because we think we might have to go to war with you. That's fine. No problem with that on your freaking doorsteps. But you can't even come in our hemisphere or we're going crazy about it. That is an imperial country that wants to be a global dominance. That is the kind of actions that sends fears throughout the world, adversaries and friends. This is not peace through strength. This is you are destroying our future hope and stability because you are giving people a reason around the world to fear us in the worst way. Not the respect that you claim that you want, which is healthy. This is fear like and anger, like we better do something while we can before you get too big. And we have to be ready to take action because we don't know when you're coming for us next. That's the kind of behavior that causes people to take action against your interest for fear of what you may do later. It does not provide deterrence. See, what Secretary Hegseth and Senator Schmidt and all these other guys like Stephen Miller, they want a boot on your neck. They want you to, as General Keane said, bend the knee to what we're telling you to do. It doesn't work, folks. It's never worked. That always makes people rise up against you. That doesn't get any respect. That doesn't get any admiration other than other people who want you to do that on their behalf. So a lot of people are certainly cheering it on. Let me not mischaracterize it. But in the main, normal people don't like that and they fear it. And history says they'll eventually take action against it. That's what you need to understand. So those who may be tempted to have all these claps and applause and all this to what's going on, you need to understand this has some dark undertones and you've gone too far without any constraints, either from our own laws and constitution or from our allies and our friends. Sometimes, man, we should talk about friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? So you see somebody who's drunk, get behind the wheel, just getting out of the way or getting in the back seat and saying, well, I can't say anything. He's a popular guy. You know that could get a lot of people killed. Same kind of situation here. Keir Starmer ain't doing us any favors. He's not doing his own country any favors. Emmanuel Macron, by not saying a word to Trump and equivocating all this, because that communicates weakness. Trump rightly regards that as you're a vassal. Just like I want Venezuela to bend the knee, I expect you to bend the knee. I expect everybody to give fealty to me without any constraints. That's not healthy. It's not healthy for Europe. It's not healthy for America. Someday, at one of these points, we're going to have to get a hold on this, folks. Otherwise, we may find ourselves in a war where someone finally puts us to the test and says, I don't believe you can do it. Prove to me that you have the manpower, that you have the industrial capacity, and you have the will to actually fight and sustain a war and endure casualties. We do. Somebody may count chances that one day and push us to the test. And I'm telling you, I'm begging you to understand, we can't fight a war of attrition right now against anything close to a peer organization. We can't do it. That's where we are, folks. That's what you need to understand. So let's take a calming pill on all this euphoria and enthusiasm over this massive success that we claim in Venezuela and understand this is point one. We don't even know how this one's going to turn out because we still don't know what Venezuela is going to do. Are they going to bend the knee, or are they going to start resisting? Who knows how this is going to work out? But you see, there's a lot of other things at play here, and we need to be sober-minded about all of this. Thanks a lot, folks. I really appreciate you, and sorry for this unusual situation. We got Larry Johnson this afternoon at 2:30 p.m. Really looking forward to that one. I'll be back in my studio by then, so I don't have to worry about helicopters flying over and all that stuff. So or phone calls coming in on the phone. Anyway, appreciate you guys a lot, and we'll look forward to seeing you this afternoon on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.
You know we don't have sponsors because we hate to hit you over the head with ads. I don't like them. So show a little love back. Subscribe, like, and send this to somebody you care about.